One of the biggest questions surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers as training camp gets closer has nothing to do with a surprise trade, a free agent signing, or even a contract dispute inside the organization. Instead, it revolves around one player who hasn't even signed his rookie contract yet. Drew Allar's situation has started generating questions among Steelers fans, but according to the information discussed, there is no indication that Pittsburgh is facing any kind of negotiation problem with its young quarterback. The delay appears to be part of the normal rookie contract process across the league. Everything begins with the first quarterback selected in the draft. Until the top overall pick signs his deal, the quarterbacks selected after him generally wait because every contract establishes the market for the next player. It becomes a domino effect. Once those first contracts are finalized, the remaining rookie quarterbacks usually sign within a short period of time. That means there is currently no suggestion that Drew Allar is asking for more money or attempting to create leverage over the Steelers. In reality, there is very little leverage available for him in this situation, making it likely that his agreement arrives shortly before training camp officially begins. While that contract remains a topic of discussion, another quarterback debate is becoming even more interesting inside Pittsburgh. The battle for the backup position could become one of the most important competitions during training camp. At this point, the expectation is that Will Howard has an opportunity to earn the QB2 role, but nothing has been handed to him. The coaching staff appears determined to make him prove that he deserves that responsibility rather than simply awarding it because of potential. That creates an intriguing competition with Mason Rudolph, who already has experience as a reliable backup. The Steelers know exactly what Rudolph offers. He has been in difficult situations before, understands the system, and represents a dependable option if needed. Will Howard, however, brings something different to the table. He is younger and could still possess long-term upside if his development continues in the right direction. The organization now wants to discover whether that upside can translate into consistent NFL production. This competition becomes even more significant because of the reality surrounding Aaron Rodgers. Even if Rodgers enters the season as the unquestioned starter, the Steelers cannot simply assume he will play every game. As discussed, Rodgers is now 42 years old and has dealt with injuries during each of the last 4 seasons. That means Pittsburgh must prepare for the possibility that its backup quarterback could be forced into meaningful regular season action at some point during the year. Because of that possibility, the coaching staff cannot afford to make an emotional decision. Whoever wins the backup job must genuinely earn the trust of the organization. If Will Howard performs well with the second-team offense throughout camp, handles preseason games confidently, and demonstrates that he can execute the offense efficiently, he could claim that position. If not, Mason Rudolph becomes the safer alternative. Everything will depend on performance over the coming weeks rather than expectations. Aaron Rodgers himself is also at the center of another fascinating conversation entering the season. One of the biggest criticisms of his recent play has been his reluctance to consistently attack defenses down the field. Last season, his average depth of target ranked among the lowest in the league. Many of his throws came on checkdowns, quick passes, and plays behind the line of scrimmage. While getting the football out quickly certainly has value, an offense eventually becomes predictable if defenses no longer fear vertical throws. The belief is not that Rodgers suddenly needs to become a quarterback who throws deep on every possession. Instead, the offense simply needs enough vertical aggression to force opposing defenses into respecting every level of the field. Without that threat, defensive coordinators become increasingly comfortable crowding short passing lanes and attacking the line of scrimmage. There are reasons to believe Pittsburgh could help Rodgers improve in that area. The offensive personnel has changed, giving him additional receiving options capable of creating opportunities further downfield. The expectation is that improved weapons, combined with adjustments in the offensive approach, could allow Rodgers to balance his quick decision-making with a more aggressive passing attack. If that happens, the Steelers' offense could become considerably more difficult to defend than it was a year ago. This discussion naturally leads into a much larger question surrounding the entire roster. Expectations are beginning to rise as training camp approaches, and several position groups appear capable of taking significant steps forward if young players continue developing and veteran additions perform as expected. But as always, everything still has to be proven once practices begin and competition becomes real. Do you believe the Steelers have the right plan for developing their quarterback room while also giving Aaron Rodgers the support he needs this season? Or do you think there is still one major concern that Pittsburgh must solve before training camp officially gets underway? That same optimism extends well beyond the quarterback position, because when you look across the roster, there are several units that could become real strengths for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh if everything develops the way the organization hopes. However, there are also a few groups that still have important questions to answer before anyone can confidently call this one of the NFL's elite teams. Quarterback remains a position where expectations should stay realistic. Aaron Rodgers is no longer viewed as one of the league's dominant passers simply because of his resume. At this stage of his career, he projects much closer to the middle of the NFL starting quarterback rankings than to the very top. That does not mean he cannot win football games. It simply means the Steelers need the roster around him to elevate his play, rather than expecting Rodgers to carry the offense by himself. The running back room appears much more stable. It may not be considered the absolute best in football, but it has the potential to be one of the more reliable groups in the AFC if everyone performs to expectations. The same can be said for the tight end position, where Pittsburgh enters the season with confidence that it has a quality combination capable of contributing in both the passing game and as blockers. Wide receiver, meanwhile, may have one of the widest ranges of possible outcomes on the entire roster. There is clear talent available, but there are also unanswered questions. Michael Pittman Jr. brings experience, yet he will need to prove that injuries and age are not beginning to slow him down. At the same time, younger receivers like Jeremy Bernard and Roman Wilson must continue progressing if Pittsburgh wants to develop the kind of three-receiver combination that can consistently threaten opposing defenses. The potential certainly exists, but potential alone never wins football games. The offensive line may ultimately determine just how far this offense can go. There is confidence that Aaron Rodgers' quick release can help reduce pressure and pass protection, but young linemen still need to prove themselves once the regular season begins. Development along the offensive front remains essential because protecting Rodgers and creating room for the running game will influence every aspect of the offense. If there is one position group that generates the most excitement entering the season, though, it is the defensive front. Expectations are extremely high for both the defensive line and the outside linebackers. Pittsburgh has invested heavily in building strength in the trenches, and that philosophy continues to shape the roster. There is confidence that this group possesses the talent and depth necessary to become one of the league's premier defensive units if everyone remains healthy. Not every defensive position receives the same level of confidence, however. Inside, linebacker remains one of the biggest question marks on the roster. There is obvious physical talent available. Patrick Queen has already demonstrated the ability to perform at an extremely high level during his career, while Peyton Wilson possesses impressive athletic ability. The challenge is translating those tools into consistently productive football. There is hope that a different defensive approach can place both players in situations where they can maximize their strengths. But until that happens consistently on the field, this remains a position that still has something to prove. The secondary, on the other hand, inspires much more confidence. The outside cornerbacks are expected to match up well against opposing receivers, while Jalen Ramsey's versatility could become one of the most valuable pieces of the defense. His ability to contribute against the run, move around the formation, and impact multiple areas of the field gives Pittsburgh flexibility that many defenses simply do not have. Combined with physical safeties capable of tackling and contributing in different situations, the secondary has the ingredients to become one of the stronger units on the team. All of these discussions ultimately circle back to one fascinating long-term storyline that continues to generate debate among Steelers fans: Drew Allar. Patience is becoming increasingly rare in today's NFL. Young quarterbacks are often expected to become stars almost immediately, and if they struggle early, many organizations move on before proper development ever takes place. The Steelers appear determined to take a different approach. The belief is that if Drew Allar truly possesses starting caliber potential, Pittsburgh has created an environment that gives him the best possible chance to reach it. His physical tools have never been the primary concern. Throughout much of his college career, he was viewed as a first-round caliber talent because of his arm strength and overall athletic ability. The bigger challenge has always been refining the details of playing quarterback at the professional level, improving mental processing, becoming more consistent with his footwork, and learning how to make faster decisions under pressure are all areas where continued development is necessary. Fortunately for Pittsburgh, the organization believes it has assembled the right environment for that process. Rather than forcing Allar onto the field immediately, the Steelers can allow him to spend valuable time learning behind Aaron Rodgers while also benefiting from coaching focused on quarterback development. By the time he eventually receives an opportunity, the hope is that the offensive line will be more experienced, the receiving core more established, and the entire roster stronger than it is today. If that plan unfolds successfully, Pittsburgh could place its young quarterback in a far better situation than many rookie passers experience around the league. Of course, none of that guarantees success, success. Development plans only work if the player ultimately turns his potential into production. The infrastructure may be in place, the coaching may be available, and the opportunity may eventually arrive. But at the end of the day, Drew Allar will still have to prove that he can become the franchise quarterback the Steelers hope he can be. If he does, Pittsburgh's long-term future could look very different. If he doesn't, the organization will once again find itself searching for the next answer at the most important position in football. The Steelers also appeared to understand something that many organizations around the NFL struggle to balance. Winning now and preparing for the future do not have to be opposing goals. Instead of rushing Drew Allar onto the field before he is ready, the franchise has positioned him in an environment where development can take priority over immediate expectations. That may not generate the biggest headlines today, but it could become one of the organization's smartest long-term decisions if everything unfolds as planned. One of the biggest advantages for Allar is that he will not be asked to carry the weight of the franchise from day one. Too often, highly drafted quarterbacks enter difficult situations where they are expected to fix an entire offense immediately. Pittsburgh does not appear to be placing that burden on its young